So while we can't be certain if these allegations are entirely true, they go some way towards... Oh, God, I've done it again.
What are you doing?
Started a sentence and not bothered finishing it.
Classic.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the Co-Conspirators podcast. Unfortunately, we don't have a special guest this week. Please do feel free to check out the last episode, featuring our resident film expert George from Clappercast, who joined us to discuss some of the secrets and conspiracy theories to have emerged from the world of Hollywood. So, handling hosting duties this week is me, Calum, and I'm joined by my ever-present co-host, John.
Hello.
And Luke.
Hello.
If you watched our previous episode, then you might be familiar with the very entertaining discussion we had regarding the link between the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Project Serpo.
An absolute classic.
Yeah, this really opened our eyes to the fascinating world of extraterrestrials, with a conspiracy theory that claimed to consist of leaked US documents detailing a top-secret exchange program between humans and an advanced alien race from a distant star system. Regardless of how plausible this may seem on the surface, or even when you dig deeper into the quote-unquote declassified files, this presented the perfect stepping stone to the subject of this podcast, which is all about alien abductions, UFO sightings, and everything in between. Before we go any further, then, do you guys believe in aliens? Have any strong feelings on the matter?
To be honest, I think you'd be crazy not to believe in aliens. Just the size of the universe, and Earth falls within the perfect belt. There's got to be another planet out there that falls within that belt where life can be maintained, really. There's even talk of, life on I think it's Saturn, the Moon, Titan, beneath the ice surface, so can survive there. You'd think anywhere in the universe there could really be life. I'm not saying it's necessarily intelligent. Chances are there's definitely something out there.
Yeah, I think I agree with Luke on that one. I think we did touch on it a little bit in our last podcast, the film one. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely believe there is some sort of life out there. I think it's a different question as to whether it's ever visited Earth or whether it's possible to, because when you see how big the universe is, and there's places like millions of light years away.
It's crazy, really, isn't it? Like, you can see stars in the night sky that died when the dinosaurs were still on the Earth. It just blows me.
I know, yeah, exactly. I think it's unlikely we're going to be visited anytime soon. You never know, maybe we have been visited already.
Exactly. Maybe this podcast might open a few eyes to some of our potential visitings from our far-off friends. But yeah, I think you basically hit the nail on the head for most rational people's thoughts of, yes, there probably is a life in some form, but it's not going to take these large grey-haired and large-eyed humanoid form that we're used to seeing in so many forms of science fiction. Chances are it could be some single-celled life forms crawling around on a rock somewhere. Definitely without the means of travelling hundreds of thousands of light years to our planet and crashing into each other in the New Mexico desert.
I suppose you could make the case that maybe, because we're clearly the most advanced form of life on Earth, I suppose you could make a case that the human form is almost the ideal form for being an apex predator. So perhaps elsewhere there would be aliens that look like us, but it would depend on their planet being similar to Earth. If there was a planet similar to Earth, I suppose you could make the case that maybe they could look like us.
Yeah, well, they could look like a Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah, a
let down by its small arms, though, isn't it?
Yeah, like Pickford.
Where does the whole idea of what aliens look like come from? Because I think everyone pictures them exactly the same. I guess it's probably just the first big film or first big book on them, and it's just kind of stuff.
Yeah, really. Probably it's just a science fiction writer or something came up with something that sort of looks like humans enough but enough to be different. Maybe it's just in the unknown. It's that scary, uncanny valley element.
Yeah. I feel like we always assume they're naked as well, and
yeah.
We touched on it in our, I think in our Moon episode actually, but Earth actually sent out a message to the rest of the universe, a little capsule with what Earth's all about.
Maybe they just haven't got into context. They hated the music we sent out.
You should look at some of the tracks. I can't remember who they sent out. But
they sent out Bowie and they sent out Beatles. I don't know what else.
Imagine a bit of Pink Floyd will be on there. Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, probably.
Well, they sent out tribal music as well. So.
Bit of Mongolian throat singing.
Probably, actually. Yeah.
They sent out Oggy Oggy. No, they sent out da 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 da, but without the knock knock at the end. So they knocked back.
Ultimate respect if they're answering that correctly.
Yeah,
but yeah, you think that probe hasn't really gotten very far in the grand scheme of the universe. So you can think there'd be countless forms of life out there just beyond the reaches of the probe. And we may never ever find out, which is one of the most fascinating thing about potential alien life, just given how big the galaxy actually is and galaxies beyond.
It's like a needle in a haystack on steroids, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and plus the perfect balance of everything that's needed for our planet to sustain life. But yeah, so as we've been alluding to, humans have an inherent fascination with the unknown. And ever since the discovery of our solar system and the other planets within, one question has been plaguing the minds of governments, scientists, and common folk alike. Is there any life out there? Sightings of UFOs, or unidentified flying objects, have been attributed to extraterrestrial activity and really took a hold of the public conscience in the years following World War II. Such sightings have taken many forms, from flying saucer-like objects and spinning discs to strange light formations, crop circles, and ominous sounds. Official explanations are equally as varied, which can include weather balloons, military testing projects, star formations, and swamp gas, just to name a few. So Cold War tensions and the possibility that the Soviets were testing top-secret rockets and other military technology meant that UFO sightings peaked in the years between 1945 and 1970, with US government Project Blue Book dedicated to debunking the many public sightings of unidentified flying objects that were reported during this time period. Nevertheless, UFO sightings still crop up in the news from time to time, despite living in an age where computer technology has increased skepticism and made UFO hoaxes very easy to produce. Before we get into the theories, I will briefly mention a recent UFO incident that caught the attention of both enthusiasts and the general public. On the 20th of May this year, in the Brazilian municipality of Marja, thousands of residents reported seeing glowing lights in the sky. As can be expected in today's society, videos were uploaded to Twitter and Reddit using the hashtag MarjaUFO, which hit the trending tab. Not long after, all traces of the UFO sighting seemed to vanish, along with the trending status, which led many UFO enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists to speculate that a cover-up had been initiated. This theory was further fueled by the fact that Google Earth showed a strange white shape covering the supposed crash site. When enthusiasts looked it up, the shape was shaped mysteriously like a traditional flying saucer, or how they tend to be depicted, which just got people thinking even more, I guess.
It's definitely one of them things where if it's, something innocent, then all of that cover-up surely doesn't need to happen. So it does make you question, for sure.
There's ways to handle these things without completely fueling the conspiracy theorists.
Maybe they want to fuel them.
That's true, actually, because there's been reports of CIA monitoring UFO sightings who've deliberately leaked false UFO reports to try and keep track of the enthusiasts to see if they're actually getting close to any of top secret projects, which may hint that they have got some UFO sightings that have been legitimate, but they're not. It's just sort of just spreading disinformation just to keep the public a bit distracted, I guess.
On that kind of topic, have either of you ever seen a UFO?
No, I don't think I can recall I've seen anything that I've thought, right, that's suspicious.
I think there's probably been a few times in my life when I think that's been suspicious. I'm sure it's very easily explainable, but at the time I thought, that's definitely not looking like a plane.
I've seen a few things where they look like weird lights, or they've seemed to be moving a lot faster along the sky than a plane would. But I've never seen like a proper flying saucer or anything. They've always been at night.
That would make you think, how would you react if you genuinely saw a traditional science fiction type flying saucer hovering above your garden or something like that?
I don't know. I'd shit myself. Because there's like drones out there now specifically designed for that. So there's they've made drones in the shape of those flying saucers, and when you fly them at a height of 100 feet or something, they have the illusion of looking miles in the air. And so I think if I saw one of those, you'd be really creeped out, but I suppose you could then explain it away as being one of those.
Yeah, now you've mentioned that. If I ever do see someone, it's like, okay, that's a drone, just shut the curtains and go to sleep or whatever. Perhaps adding further weight to many of the UFO conspiracy theories that have emerged over the years, the fact that the Pentagon's UFO unit, and it's been in the spotlight this past week, after reports emerged that a long-hidden UFO investigative unit within the Pentagon will make some of its findings public, according to the New York Times. Ufologist interests were especially piqued with the news that a government contractor told the Times that he gave a classified briefing to the Department of Defense in March, describing retrievals from off-world vehicles not made on this Earth.
So they're going to release this off-world vehicle information on
it? If you believe this report, then yes, or at least there are going to be some potential sightings and some of the data they've been storing over the years of a project that has been hidden from public record, but yeah.
I guess with the whole Raid Area 51 event last year, they might be trying to be more transparent, kind of just to throw people the track that they'd cover anything up. Kind of like, oh yeah, look, we're releasing all this information, we're not covering anything up, when in reality there's some big secrets still.
Yeah, that's quite a good point, actually, because they were very concerned about the air when the Area 51 raid really took hold. Like, millions of people joined the group or whatever it was.
I forgot about that until now.
But then there was one report they had to retract by saying they would have a B-52 bomber on standby if things got out of hand. They were actually preparing for about 30 to 40,000 people descending on the Nevada desert, when in reality about 2,000 people tops turned up. They were also prepared to use a lethal force, I think, if people were trespassing.
The people he showed up with jokes as well. They were exactly the type of people you thought would show up.
Fair play for them actually committing to the meme, I say.
Yeah, I agree. Credit to him.
Also, the guy who organised the thing got his house raided by the FBI. They were that concerned. Yeah, just back to this recent revelation. So, former Nevada Senator Harry Reid, who was instrumental in funding the original UFO program, or search for UFO program, told the Times he'd seen reports both substantive and not so substantive, indicating that crashes of objects of unknown origin may have occurred and that retrieved materials should be studied. They go some way towards solidifying some of the UFO conspiracies that may exist out there, if the government has in fact found material that is otherworldly and of unexplained origin. So this announcement also followed the release of 3 US Navy videos showing unidentified aerial phenomena that were confirmed to be real sightings and could be the closest thing to a genuine UFO occurrence that we've seen, following their initial leak a couple of years prior. So it cannot be said whether these unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, for any COD fans out there, came from advanced foreign military technology or even extraterrestrial activity from the far reach of space. But there are definite indications that the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force will, quote, standardize collection and reporting on sightings of UAVs, publicly divulge at least some of its findings twice a year, again according to the Times. So while we wait for the findings to hopefully emerge from this 2021 report, this podcast will entertain some of the most interesting UFO and alien conspiracies to have occurred over the years.
I feel like they'll just make the files so boring that no one can bother to read into the nitty-gritty details of them.
Sounds true, especially when they said they will release some, or at least some of the findings. So yeah, all the boring stuff will get pushed out there, and they'll keep all the juicy bits back to never be leaked by a whistleblower.
How can they say release some of the findings? That's just going to make people even more suspicious.
Yeah.
Either release all of them or none of them.
I guess maybe things like legally binding technical terminology. But yeah, it's an interesting development. It does show that UFOs might be coming back into the public eye somewhat, especially after the Area 51 raid.
It'll definitely be interesting to see if anything comes of those files.
Yeah, definitely. Potentially something for a follow-up episode. With that in mind, I'll hand over to John to introduce our first theory, which is easily one of the most widely recognised conspiracies on this planet and perhaps the further reaches of the galaxy. So over to you, John.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Calum. So what I'm going to be looking at is known as the Roswell Incident, one of the most famous alien encounters, well, of all time, really. So on the 8th of July, 1947, a supposed crashed alien spacecraft was discovered on a ranch near New Mexico, around 30 miles outside of a town called Roswell. The ranch owner, William Mac Brazel, collected some of the debris from the wreckage, which included metal strips, pieces of rubber, as well as other materials that he did not recognize. The next day, he saw reports in the local newspaper of eyewitnesses seeing a UFO crash in the area. So alarmed, he contacted his local sheriff to tell him what he'd found. The sheriff told him that what he'd found was a flying disc, and he told Brazel that he could not speak a word of his discovery to anyone. The sheriff then called the military, who took the wreckage away. It was soon announced that a flying saucer had been captured in the Roswell Daily Record newspaper. Hundreds of eyewitnesses claimed to have seen the incident, from flying saucers to bright lights, making it one of, if not the most witnessed UFO of all time. Some of these witnesses went as far as saying that they saw strange, charred creatures inside the airfield and also being removed from the craft. So the official story was that the UFO was actually a weather balloon that had crashed, but many have cast doubt over this theory. After all, it would seem pretty straightforward, I think, to tell the difference between a weather balloon and an alien spacecraft.
I guess given it was 1947, do you think it could be like any kind of American military invention or innovation attempt that just went so horribly wrong and they just decided to do anything to cover it?
I would say hold that thought.
Okay.
I suppose with the weather balloon argument, you think with the weather balloon, part of the weather balloon is this big foil canvas-like thing. You think you notice that in part of the crash? Surely that would be enough to say, right, if that's not there, okay, this couldn't be a weather balloon.
I know, and I wasn't entirely sure what a weather balloon looked like. So as part of this research, I looked one up. I mean, there's no mistaking it for a UFO. It's what it says on the tin. It's a huge balloon with a little attachment on it. So it certainly would be a very difficult theory to buy, that one.
It just really bothers me that, I mean, if this were to be true, why do they need to cover it up? I think we mentioned this last week.
Yeah, we did.
Just surely something that the world should know. And I mean, if it's no harm, then why not tell everyone?
I suppose, especially say if you are to believe that they were harvesting bodies from the crash site, there could sort of be no threats or anything like. There's no chance of any of us Earthlings jetting off to find out where they came from. Yeah, you don't maybe appreciate a little bit of honesty from the government.
I guess the only thing is, if they were trying to probe it in some way to extract some information, so
weaponize the technology.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to what we said last time, though, about I think the sheer amount of panic it would cause, that the military would maybe think, right, we've had one spacecraft come and visit. Let's try and sort all the facts. We're going to keep this quiet until we know everything, and then we'll reveal it, sort of thing. Rather than just say, put like a news bulletin out. An alien spacecraft crash landed on Earth. We know nothing about it. Get along with your lives.
I guess it was just after World War II. The last one is
we finally defeated the Nazis. I've had an alien invasion.
So you just send a country into complete turmoil. Everyone will try and want to get a glimpse of this alien or technology or something, just see the crash. It'll just mess things up if you're being entirely pragmatic about the situation.
I would go as far as saying definitely it would be the biggest news story in the history of mankind.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, not even close to anything else. So despite this official explanation of the weather balloon, many claim that one or more alien spacecraft crash-landed that day, and that the extraterrestrial occupants had been recovered by the military, which then engaged in a cover-up, stationed mainly at Area 51 in Nevada, where the aliens were tested on, performed autopsies on, and perhaps even communicated with if they were still alive. Several flying disc and flying saucer stories had already appeared in the national press that summer, and in the Roswell area in particular, which further fueled the speculation. UFO researcher Stanton Friedman came across a story in the early 1980s and began the search for information and witnesses. The research brought him to Roswell, looking for the public information officer who'd been at Roswell Army Airfield in 1947. That officer was Walter Haut. He still lived in Roswell and remembered the press release and the orders from his commanding officer. Friedman's investigation also led to many others, both military and private, who had information to add to the Roswell story. Stepping into the picture very strongly in the late 1980s were Don Schmitt, Kevin Randall, and Tom Carey. And since then, Schmitt and Carey have dedicated their entire lives to researching the Roswell incident after the evidence that they saw. Many eyewitnesses, including the ranch owner, reported seeing a very bright light in the sky that night, as well as a round disc. The debris recovered by the ranch owner was gathered by the military from the Roswell Army Airfield under the direction of Base Intelligence Officer Major Jesse Marcel. On the 8th of July 1947, Public Information Officer Lieutenant Walter Haut issued a press release under orders from Base Commander Colonel William Blanchard, which basically said that we have in our possession a flying saucer that was also referred to by the local sheriff as a flying disc. The next day, another press release was issued, this time from General Roger Ramey, stating that it was in fact a weather balloon, which was the start of the highly controversial and speculated about UFO cover-up.
So I guess the idea is that they found something a bit scary and quickly changed the story.
Yeah.
They've said it's a flying disc and then changed the story. That makes it doubly suspicious now.
Yeah, I mean, especially as a weather balloon isn't even close to being a disc, really.
Yeah, I know.
I think I read somewhere the crash site was about 200 yards in size. I'm not sure if that's the same theory. That's pretty big for a weather balloon crash, you not think?
Yeah, it was 280 yards long, the crash site, in terms of circumference. And it was just on a ranch, like in the middle of nowhere. And he almost just stumbled across it. But he did say that he saw bright light in the sky. He didn't say he heard anything in terms of a crash, but then the next day he discovered it. And then he saw all the reports in the newspaper the next day that loads of people had seen a bright light and a few had seen saucers and discs. And it was only when he read those reports that he thought, actually, I might kind of let the newspapers and the sheriff know about this. So he took some of the debris and he saw that some of the materials he recognised, but some of them he didn't really know what they were.
You think because he was the first person to actually discover this crash site, would you not have probed through it quite thoroughly? You think you're the first person seen to try and see what you were able to find out before the military, government, etc. get their hands on it, and then they say later they pulled out bodies.
He could have only maybe found a little portion of it. Maybe he didn't stumble across the whole thing, because it said he found strips of metal, pieces of rubber, things that looked like tinfoil, and then loads of materials he didn't recognise. guys. And so after reading the reports in the paper, he then got the police involved, and then they got the military involved. So yeah, perhaps he didn't find everything. Maybe he didn't find the actual ship, but it doesn't really say.
Also, did he willingly surrender his sort of findings of the strange materials over to the army? Did they forcefully say, right, you've got to give us everything you've got on this?
No, so he wanted to keep some of it because he took some of it into his house. So he contacted the sheriff. I think he basically thought the sheriff wouldn't really think much of it, or he'd come up with an explanation straight away. And then the sheriff called the military, and they came and took every last piece of debris back to their military base. Eventually, Area 51. Interestingly, eyewitnesses of the incident claimed to see bodies taken from the crash site and transported away in military vans. However, these were later explained in quotes, because a lot of people don't buy this, in 1997 as fallen parachute test dummies in a more extensive follow-up report to the incident. So this kind of counters the weather balloon theory, because a weather balloon would not use dummies, as there's no need for a weather balloon to be manned at all.
So were they still suggesting a weather balloon with the dummies?
They were at this time.
Because you'd think if they were to focus on this crash test dummies argument, they're trying to say we lied about the weather balloon thing. It was actually a military testing operation doing, I don't know, practicing parachute launches or something like that.
Yeah, I'm about to come on to that explanation.
Oh, okay, good.
Before that, Walter Haut, who had written the first Army press release about the Roswell crash in 1947, said that there was a document kept under seal until Haut's death in 2005. After he died in 2005, this document was released, and within it was a description of how the 1947 crash debris was discussed by high-ranking military staff who had witnessed alien bodies, including Haut himself. Yeah, basically, he signed a document that wasn't allowed to be read until he died. And then when he did die, it became, not sure whether it became public or whether it just became available to certain people. But in that document was a 1947 report of the incident saying that the military, including himself, had found alien bodies.
So right. So that's an official military document that said bodies were found.
It's an official document by this military person, Walter Haut. Not sure whether it's like an official government document or not, but it was signed by official military personnel, including himself.
It just got you thinking.
There's definitely loads of stuff in the classified files that is creepy and perhaps out of this world, I'd say.
If you're referring to test dummies, you'd call them test dummies, you wouldn't call them bodies. There's a clear distinction.
Yeah. You wouldn't call them alien bodies.
No.
The problem is that Americans call foreigners aliens, so they could just be wrong.
They have entered the US airspace illegally.
They're illegal aliens.
I feel like they'd refer to them as Soviets or Russians, though, especially at that time.
Yeah, I don't know.
The illegal aliens just reserved for Mexicans.
But yeah, UFOs aren't the only possibility with the Roswell incident. According to a recent explanation, the wreckage actually came from a spy device created for an until then classified project called Project Mogul. The device consisted of a connected string of high-altitude balloons equipped with microphones and was designed to float over the USSR, detecting sound waves at stealth distance.
See, that's definitely something that they'd want to cover up.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it wasn't an alien, then it wouldn't be my first guess, of course, but it seems quite likely, given the lengths they went to cover this up.
Again, it's kind of got the balloon problem, though. I still think you wouldn't mistake a balloon for a UFO, especially once it crash-landed, but you never know. One thing I've only just thought of now, though, is described as a spy, like a very stealthy piece of equipment. But then loads of people in the local area, literally hundreds of people, that night reported seeing a really bright light. And you feel like if it was a spy craft, one of the worst design flaws it could have is a massive bright light on it. Doesn't matter how quiet it is, if it's sort of flash.
Just a tiny bit of critical thinking does sort of send that argument in flames a little bit if you're being really skeptical.
So yeah, I think that casts perhaps a bit of doubt on this explanation. But this actually remains the official explanation to this day. And these balloons were designed to monitor the Soviet government's attempt at testing their own atomic bomb. And because it was obviously a covert operation, a false explanation of the crash was necessary to prevent giving away details of their spy work. Now, for a lot of people, this was a suitable suggestion as to perhaps some of the discrepancies in official explanations of what happened with the incident, as it was in fact a cover-up for a secret military test. However, some believe it was yet another deception, given it took 40 years for this to be revealed, and spy balloons hadn't been used in decades, given the technology had far surpassed them even by the 1950s. So they wouldn't need to keep this under wraps for this long. It was a kind of obsolete technology.
Yeah, so I was thinking, does this explanation cover the test dummies as well, or supposedly the aliens?
I'm not sure. It doesn't say whether it was like a robot spy craft or whether it would have to be manned and you would need the parachute dummies.
So to send something from the US to the Soviet Union, it'd be quite difficult just to float some balloons across.
I was going to say, it doesn't seem very efficient or safe.
Yeah, it's not a very precise way of getting to your location where the Soviets are testing their potential nuclear weapons. So just floating, it's got a bit of control with the gas burners or whatever is powering it.
Yeah,
so
I'm struggling to buy it, I think.
It seems like a bit of a half-baked plan from the get-go, alien UFO or not.
Former President Barack Obama poured water on the flames of this theory, saying, "I got to tell you, it's a little disappointing. People always ask me about Roswell and the aliens and the UFOs, and it turns out the stuff going on that's top secret isn't nearly as exciting as you'd expect. In this day and age, it's not as top secret as you might think." So that quote, I suppose, would cast doubt on it, but then again, I mean, he would say that, wouldn't he? He's not going to come out and say, "Oh no, actually, it's all real. Roswell actually happened."
I have a feeling it's just something really boring that they've had to just keep quiet because it was, a bit sneaky against the Russians or something like that. So if it actually came out, everyone would just be super disappointed.
Surely if it was just that boring, it'd be all more reason just to do, okay, this is the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
It might just be some really, really dodgy shit that they would never want Russia to know they were testing out, I guess. And it could never get out, otherwise, it might actually cause nuclear Armageddon.
50 years down the line, and plus maybe Putin taking advantage of Trump to the nth degree, but they think they're quite chummy.
At that time, they were
absolute sworn enemies.
Dodgy stuff as well, space rockets, all that jazz.
So yeah, I think, to be honest, that kind of brings me to the end of this theory. In terms of some of the deeper stuff with Roswell, it all seems to be based on speculation of what they did with the bodies once they had them. In 1995 and in 2005, there was footage released supposedly from inside Area 51 of them testing on the Roswell alien body. But a lot of people say, that's fake footage. And I have seen the footage, and as realistic as it does look, I mean, you kind of think, how would that ever get out in the first place? Who would be filming it way back in the 1940s?
They would be documenting their progress to the experiments. But equally, It's very much like someone has just decided to dirty up some temporary footage they filmed themselves with special effects experts just to fuel the flames, I guess, of the conspiracy.
Yeah. The main areas of evidence, perhaps, of this will be the fact that there were hundreds of sightings on the day and in the weeks building up. So many that they're even featuring in the local and national newspapers, saying that people were seeing flashing lights and flying discs. And that was the only reason that the guy went to the police. I suppose the fact that it was kept under lock and key for so long and still is being. The fact that he didn't recognise some of the materials he found in the crash, and that they were swiftly taken away by the military and never returned to him. And that he was told he couldn't say a word about it, even though obviously he eventually did. And then the military deathbed confession and release of classified documents saying that they had found alien bodies on the craft. So over to you guys, what do you reckon on this one?
For me, personally, it's one of the ones I really want to believe. I really want it to be true.
Yeah.
I think everyone's really known there.
That's that classic UFO story. In the middle of nowhere, small-time farmer finds it. Doesn't know what he's getting into. Military, governments, FBI, CIA, whatever, all called on to descend on the scene, pack everything up, and then it's just a slow feeding of several different potentially nonsense stories that no one really buys, especially when you consider that so many reports of UFO sightings were filed on the night of that crash, whatever crashed into the ground. The biggest argument, I suppose, against being a spy technology is the fact that so many people saw it.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a conspiracy goes, I'm a big fan of this one. So as just as a quick rating, I'm going to have to give it a 9 out of 10, just because it is the quintessential alien UFO conspiracy, on a par with Project Serpo for me now. But we talked about that last episode.
I hope this gets a higher believability than that.
Somehow I think it will, because a potential extraterrestrial life form crashing into the desert is one thing, but sending off a team of humans to a galaxy 40 light years away, having them spend 10 years there, coming back, many living to tell the tale. Yeah, I think slightly more believable, all things considered. But yeah, I think for the believability then, if you're going to go down that road, as much as I really want it to be true, and I think there are some things that do ring the bells of all this is very suspicious, such as describing the humanoid figures, whether they're dummies or actual aliens, as being aliens in a military report. But even if it's just one guy and he's trying to have a bit of a joke or something, I don't know. That's questionable for sure. That the guys had all of the evidence of the crash removed by the military, saying you find materials he didn't recognise. But then, on the other hand, I'm sure a farmer wouldn't really be able to recognise some of the technology the military was using at the time. So I think some more experimental things, if you're going to believe that angle. But yeah, I really want to give this above a 5. I'm going to just dip below the threshold of it could happen. I'm going to go for a 4.5 on the believability that an alien actually did crash. Partly wishful thinking, but there's enough that doesn't add up for, I don't know, you just want the classified files to be released maybe one day in our lifetime.
Luke, what do you reckon?
I just kind of got to echo what Calum said. It's something that you really, really, really want to be true. I think there's nothing more I'd want in my life. Well, no story I'd rather prefer in my life than just to find out there's life out there. There's not really any doubt in my head that there is. I just don't really see a plausible way for us to actually find that out, which is kind of upsetting. But yeah, because of, what it is and how big it is and how well it's known, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10 as a conspiracy.
Ooh, very generous.
That might be one of the highest scores we ever had.
Yeah.
In terms of believability, I'm not a physicist, but everything I know about physics just tells me it's not really possible for an alien to come to Earth unless, they're nearby, and almost certainly there's not this kind of intelligent alien life in the nearby solar system. Otherwise, you'd expect us to know about it, but then again, other life forms could be hundreds, if not thousands, if not even a million years ahead of us and had a head start on the whole technological game. So who knows, maybe they're at a stage where they're able to, break the laws of physics in a way, because to be fair, a lot of things in physics seem to be theories rather than set in stone, they're hypotheses. And so these life forms could have existed for years and years before humans have. They could have found ways to, manipulate this and travel around the solar system and the universe.
You never know. I suppose the most tiny, minute possibility that it's an alien with an incredibly, incredibly long lifespan that's just been travelling relatively slowly for space travel through galaxies, just plugging away, eventually got to Earth and crashed.
just got to land it now. Nice big desert to land it in.
Ready?
It's a bit typical that it's in a place like America where, there is definitely some questionable cover-ups going on. Wouldn't be surprised if, you heard, well, you didn't hear about, but there's similar events that have happened in countries like Russia and China that have quickly been covered up by the government and not received as much attention as this, because this kind of story could happen anywhere in the world.
China especially, they will believe the story. They'll be forced to believe the story. Yeah. Otherwise it's jail.
It's a bit off tangent as well, but, maybe aliens could have crashed into the ocean and no one ever really knew.
Well, I think everyone on Earth looks like fish.
One more thing I'll add, again, it's a bit off tangent, but, I'd be interested to have a look if there's any stories from, like the ancient Egyptians or like 1200s of people spotting UFOs.
Have you not seen the cave paintings in ancient Egypt? Like legit, in the pyramids, there are paintings of proper flying saucers in the sky. It's really weird.
Yeah, there's a big conspiracy, right, that the aliens built the pyramids and stuff like that. So I think that's definitely something that we will definitely talk about in future episodes. Anyway, back to Roswell, New Mexico. The physics brings it down, but the fact that these alien life forms could have existed so many years before humans and had such a head start means I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. They're covering up something. I think it's unlikely to be aliens, something more military. So that brings the score down a bit, but it's still a solid 5.
That's quite good as your believabilities go.
It is, yeah.
It's just, I'm going with my heart rather than my head. I just want it to be true.
If there's one conspiracy you want to be true, it is this one.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'll quickly give my thoughts. As usual, I really enjoyed researching this one. I think, the idea that the US government found an alien and covered it up for years is so compelling and fascinating. I think as a conspiracy, I'm going to give it a 9.5 as well. In terms of believability, I think there's certainly some strong factors, I think, in terms of the fact that there were hundreds of reports of sightings of UFOs in the sky in the build-up and even on that night that it crashed. And also the kind of deathbed confession is certainly interesting. And unlike you two, I can kind of understand why the government might cover it up if they found it and why they wouldn't feel comfortable releasing that information. So I certainly wouldn't rule it out. I think when you think of the size of just the observable universe alone, let alone the universe in its entirety, it's like 50 billion light years. looking at it that way, there's almost certainly life out there. Let's say it was on the peripheries, it might take 25 billion years traveling at the speed of light just to reach us, which no matter how advanced you are, that's still going to take a very, very long time to ever reach us. So probably brings the believability down a bit, but I think I'm going to go slap bang in the middle. I'm going to go for a 5 out of 10.
I think if they're trying to cover up UFO sightings, I think airplanes are probably the greatest things of all time. Because I mean, I'm not really conspiracy nut, and if I ever saw like any weird flashing lights in the sky, I'd just assume it's an airplane and not really look any deeper into it.
You confuse stars and planes sometimes, I know, or helicopters.
I do it all the time, yeah. Your thought is always, it's not a UFO, it's an airplane or a star.
I suppose like subconsciously you want to just rationalise what you see rather than think, it's something I couldn't possibly comprehend.
It's kind of the old adage, is it? You never see a ghost in the day, and you never really see a UFO in the day.
Yeah, seeing a UFO in the day would be a very different experience, that's for sure. We'd just see it more believable if you saw something like that in a broad daylight.
Okay, cool. And so I'll hand over to Calum now for our next theory.
Right, great stuff, John. Thank you. When dealing with UFO conspiracies, there are usually two main ports of call that immediately spring to mind, or at least in my eyes there are. John covered the first one, that being the infamous Roswell Incident in 1947. Following on from that, I'll now detail one of the most interesting stories to emerge from Area 51, the highly classified US Air Force facility in the Nevada desert, which many believe is their center for UFO study. The US government officially acknowledged the existence of Area 51 in 2013, when the CIA declassified files pertaining to the development of the Lockheed U-2 and A-12 spy planes from the 1950s and 60s.
Is this seriously that recent?
I was thinking that as well. 2013?
I mean, it's something I knew. I think everyone knew about, didn't they?
One of the worst kept secrets of the US government. But confirming its existence maybe earlier might have just added further fuel to UFO rumours. But yeah, it's likely we'll be waiting a lot longer before details emerge of any more current projects. Just an interesting fact that the A-12 spy plane was the predecessor to the Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird, which set the record for the fastest manned jet engine flight in 1976, a record which still stands to this day. It was also one of my favourite planes growing up. Its design,
they do look mad, don't they?
It's iconic. It looks so it just looks so cool.
How fast did it go? Do you have that to hand?
It was Mach 3, at least 2,000 miles an hour. Sustained flight, not even diving or anything like that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I did a little bit more reading because I got a bit sidetracked. But yeah, they were just one of the most effective spy planes because they couldn't be shot down by surface-to-air missiles because they could fly too high for them and too fast to be caught. But so yeah, nevertheless, the fact that experimental flying technology is reported to have been studied and developed there has led many ufologists to believe that the hangars may be housing craft of alien origin, spawning many conspiracy theories. So this theory in question centers around a man named Bob Lazar, or Robert Scott Lazar, as his full name goes. He's well known amongst ufologists and conspiracists, having been the subject of several documentaries, most recently Netflix's 2018 effort entitled Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. Any of you seen that?
I haven't. I've seen him on Joe Rogan podcast. He went on that. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, so I was just going to come on to that, but his documentary secured him a place on the Rogan podcast, which his appearances amassed over 12 million views on YouTube, and has recently seen a bit of renewed interest following the news I mentioned in the introduction to the podcast regarding the Pentagon's supposed releasing of UFO documents. Bob's story first came to light in May 1989. News anchor and investigative journalist George Knapp was approached by a physicist who claimed to work for the US government as part of a top-secret program based in Groom Lake, Nevada. Under the pseudonym Dennis, this whistleblower recounted details of their time working at the Groom Lake military base, claiming that the base housed 9 flying saucers or flying discs of alien origin, which were test-flown by the military. Dennis was fearing for his safety, having recounted threats from the government relating to his, or accusing him of espionage, threatening both him and his wife's lives. Other revelations to have emerged from this interview were that Dennis was employed to reverse engineer one of the 9 flying saucers, which he claimed were of extraterrestrial origin and made from metallic substances similar to stainless steel. A few months later, George Knapp would be approached again by the same person. However, this time the hidden identity of Dennis was dropped to reveal the whistleblower's true identity, Bob Lazar. The situation appeared worse for Bob. He had been threatened by the military and couldn't find records of his own identity. Determined to expose the program he claimed to work for, Bob showed Knapp recorded evidence to support his story. During March, Lazar and some friends made 3 trips to the Nevada desert to witness so-called UFO sightings, Bob knew the test flight schedule from his time working at the S4 installation in Area 51, which allowed him to film 3 separate military test flights of the flying saucers he'd worked on. On the third visit, they were caught trespassing by the US military and arrested. The next day, Bob claims to have been called into work, had a gun put to his head, and had been shown months' worth of phone records and transcripts of conversations from both he and his wife's phones. It was through this confrontation that Lazar found out about his wife's affair, clearly showing that the government weren't messing around. So further digging into Bob's past was somewhat concerning, as no records exist to support the fact that he obtained master's degrees both from Caltech and MIT, as well as no records of him ever enrolling. His supposed employment at an Ellis Air Force Base subsidiary has also been discredited by skeptics, as well as by the US Air Force. Also, perhaps most troubling are his claims that there is no record of him ever being born, with Lazar claiming that upon leaving the UFO program, requests for his birth certificate for ID purposes were denied, and he has not seen his birth certificate since. These revelations have the potential to work both ways. Either Lazar already was a top-secret engineer of alien technology who was risking his life to expose government secrets, owing to the fact that his very existence had been removed from the record, which naturally is the angle that Bob himself has taken, or he never actually studied at the aforementioned universities, or colleges if you're being American, leading to the assumption that his entire story is made up.
Does he not have like a graduation picture or anything like that?
Nothing that's came to the record, but people have done some serious digging into this guy's background, even going to as far as to look through yearbooks from the times where he's supposed to have been at these colleges, and nothing shows up regarding his education.
Yeah, I mean, they can't really write him out of people's yearbooks, can he?
Could he not just be using a different name? Bob Lazar does not be his name. He's using it as a pseudonym or whatever.
No, I think because his parents' birth name was Lazar, or surname was Lazar. So it doesn't seem like there's no evidence he's been using another pseudonym aside from Dennis. As far as we know, and as far as he's let on, his actual name is still Bob Lazar.
So what's his explanation for not being able to be found on uni records? That they were wiped by the government as well?
Yes, essentially. Basically, any trace of his existence has been scrubbed to prevent him from exposing their secrets.
So they went as far as raiding every single person's house, like going through their loft to find the yearbook and replacing it? Or...
I guess his argument would be that the US government is incredibly powerful and incredibly secretive and has the means with which to do that, but it does seem a little bit incredulous.
To be fair, the British government offered me £50 to take my yearbook and remove Calum out of it. I'd happily let them. So.
Plus, you wouldn't even have to do that, because if somebody posted on the internet saying, oh yeah, dug out my old yearbook, here's Bob Lazar in it, then everyone would just say, yeah, it's Photoshop.
Exactly. Yes, it's one of those things. The fact that his actual records aren't listed, that makes some sense. But yeah, when you scrutinise it a little bit further, it's a little bit fishy, which is sort of an on-running theme with a lot of this theory, I'll say that much.
Is anyone making the point that it could point to him being controlled opposition? So he's purposely coming up with disinformation as instructed by the government, and he's not actually a real person, sort of thing. And they've created this backstory for him.
Interestingly, no. From my research, there's been no real accusations of being controlled opposition. It's either like the two camps. He's 100% genuine. He's a real whistleblower who's worked as part of this top secret program of UFO study. Or he's a complete hoax, con artist, phony, you name it. He's just looking to make a name for himself. But yeah, the controlled opposition would be an interesting angle. But it's one of those things, would government really risk controlled opposition for something as sensitive as Area 51?
Well, it could just be misdirection, because I think everybody now agrees if there even was anything at Area 51 at one point, then it certainly isn't in there now, and that they've moved it elsewhere, because they wouldn't want it knowing where it is. So it would make sense to me that they would have a controlled opposition, like Bob Lazar saying, oh yeah, there's all this alien stuff here, and having everybody's eyes pointed towards there, while the government actually has it somewhere else.
Yeah, it's true, I suppose, but there's a few elements of the story that might take down this controlled opposition argument and go through it. Certainly got a very interesting background. So Bob is reportedly notorious for having a foggy memory, making it very hard for him to recall specific events pertaining to his supposed work at Area 51. This was very apparent on the Joe Rogan podcast, not being able to recall certain data about some of the most important aspects of his story.
Do you not feel if it was something as secretive as this, like one of the most secretive things that they want to cover up, if there really was a whistleblower like this, they'd just eradicate him?
Yeah, I suppose that does tie a bit more into the controlled opposition argument. They're just letting him get out and say this stuff. Maybe he knows a little bit or something, I don't know.
It's almost the same reason David Icke hasn't been assassinated in some conspiracy theorists' eyes is that if he continues to talk and says a load of mad stuff, I think they almost come of the opinion that he'll end up discrediting himself anyway. Because if they were to kill Bob Lazar, then it's very incriminating kind of towards the military, whereas kind of with Epstein, if he hadn't been assassinated, then I don't think anywhere near the amount of people would suddenly think, oh no, this paedophile ring is so high up, sort of thing. But because he was, everybody then believed kind of everything about Epstein. So I think if Lazar was killed, then everybody would suddenly look at the government and go, right, he was actually telling the truth the whole time. Whereas if you just let him live, then there's always going to be that camp of people who say, oh, he's just talking rubbish.
Yeah, so that exact argument has been made. So he claimed to have had been watched by the military, had military interventions at his home, etc. Like you mentioned, phone calls being monitored, etc. So yeah, so it's a similar one to those outside of ufologists who are many looking for that positive bias to confirm what they think. They want someone to come out, blow the lid on the whole thing, and maybe willing to look past a few inconsistencies here and there if it sort of seems right. So apparently, the aforementioned George Knapp, the journalist who was reporting Lazar's story, was somehow able to use hypnosis to probe the deeper reaches of Bob's mind in an attempt to find out exactly who he was and how true his story actually was.
That's brought the believability down a bit, I'm afraid.
There was a wealth of interviews and transcripts of this happening allegedly, and I like the Project Serpent. There's a whole website dedicated to this, to all the different claims Lazar's made. There's numerous news interviews, TV interviews, documentaries made. So it's, in terms of actual information about the conspiracy, it's sensitive for sure. Whether it's true or not, that's another matter. After I mentioned, with one such hypnosis session, it was revealed that Bob came to work for the S4 facility as a replacement for a scientist who had died in a small-yield nuclear explosion, which was caused when working on a UFO engine.
Could I just say, what are your guys' thoughts on hypnosis in general? Is it legit? Because I never know. Because there's people who have like hypnosis practices and stuff. Then you see Darren Brown do it, but his whole thing is being an illusionist. So it could all just be actors. So
it's something that I wouldn't believe unless it happened to me, really.
Yeah, I think I'm siding towards that as well.
I think you'd have to see it in real life, because on TV, you think paid actors, etc., just be able to memorize a script and say some ridiculous things. Then that would also apply seeing it firsthand as well, like just people remembering some lines that the guys fed them beforehand. It's just really hard unless it does happen to you personally. Then you wouldn't have a clue what's going on.
I think as well, like the whole hypnotherapy side, to give up smoking and stuff like that. That just really errs on the side of therapy rather than anything else. And it's just like saying the right things, and good psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever it's called.
I imagine there's a little bit of evidence for it working, I suppose. But I think other things like placebo effects, stuff like that. If people believe something's working, then it does work. But it's just that as one of those real grey areas when it comes to affirming an argument, especially in this case when there's so many claims made by Lazar. So, according to Lazar's mind, it was those pesky Ebens again, as the engine was believed to be from the Zeta Reticuli system. I know, they are cropping up a lot more, Evan. That's not the last mention of them in this theory as well. I'll bear that in mind. So again, not doing wonders for my believability, I don't think. So obviously these could be just the delusional ramblings of the subconscious mind, along with the possibility that Lazar had fabricated his entire backstory and could only remember these fabrications while under the influence of hypnosis. Either way, it doesn't seem like these incredible claims are entirely watertight, and that's being generous. Determined to try and find some degree of credibility, Knapp arranged for Lazar to take a polygraph lie detector test in order to verify his story. According to the individual who administered the test, he's quoted saying, "If Bob Lazar were lying, then he would be in Hollywood, as he gave absolutely no physiological indications of attempted deception." This prompted Knapp to record a further interview where Lazar described the S4 installation hangar that was carved into the face of the mountain and camouflaged to hide it from view. He also gave details of the antimatter technology that powered the flying saucers he worked on.
The thing with the lie detector test is, isn't it kind of like if it's true in your memory, and it will come up as like you're not lying, even though, I mean, it's not technically true, but you remember it to be true because, you could argue that he's crazy and he truly believes it.
Yeah, I think it's something along those lines. It's just, if you believe you're telling the truth, you're not really lying and not going to be exhibiting any signs of lying.
Whose idea was that test? Was it Bob's?
No,
or was it independent?
Well, I say relatively independent. It's a guy, Knapp, who's been investigating Lazar's story, and who was initially exposed him to the world through his news station.
Not entirely independent.
To a degree, he's been mostly objective with looking into the backstory. He was one who couldn't find any details of his school or his university record along with a birth certificate. You know, Bob Lazar claimed had been wiped from the records. But so it's better than nothing, I guess. But then these things can be passed. Like, say, psychopaths are probably quite good at passing lie detector tests, just displaying no emotion or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the antimatter technology, which apparently used gravity as a wave and was synthesized from the as-yet undiscovered element 115, a radioactive isotope that could generate an anti-gravitational field that propelled the craft. When this interview was released, it took the UFO world by storm. Suddenly, Lazar was ufology's hottest property, people across the world clamoring to find out more. Naturally, with such media attention came skepticism, with many people highlighting flaws with the story and claiming that there's no way that the narrative lined up. Regardless, Lazar went on to star in his first major documentary entitled The Lazar Tape, which cemented his place in UFO lore. Released in 1991, it featured several big reveals of information alleging to his time working at Area 51, including details of operations similar to that of Project Serpo, which implied that aliens had been visiting Earth for thousands of years and had exchanged hardware and information with humans in Nevada. Along with more details behind the science behind element 115, the catalyst for the antimatter propulsion technology, Lazar recounted how he was hired to work at the S4 installation at Area 51. So briefly, Lazar met Edward Teller. Any of you recognise that name?
Yes, Penn and Teller.
Not quite.
Well, that's embarrassing.
You could maybe argue he's a magician in the sense that he was able to pioneer the team that designed the hydrogen bomb for World War II, part of Project Manhattan.
Father of the hydrogen bomb.
Exactly, that's how he's known colloquially.
And also famously part of Penn and Teller.
Leading a double life.
Not many people know it's the same guy.
That's their greatest illusion.
Yeah.
Lazar claimed that Teller approached him after seeing a front-page news article about a 200-mile-per-hour jet car that Bob had developed while in Los Alamos, and then gave him the contact details of an individual in Las Vegas, Nevada, that would lead to his posting at Area 51. Apparently, when asked about Lazar, Teller has since been quite shifty and doesn't really want to discuss the matter, potentially owing to Lazar's maybe ridicule in the scientific community, given his outrageous claims. Lazar, in the news article about this car, was described as a physicist. So, yeah, maybe it could add up. You think you see someone with promising physics career be able to design a fantastic work of engineering. Yeah, I'll try and get him a job at the US government. But again, it's another one of those sketchy details coming just purely from Lazar's recountings of events, and you can't really corroborate it that strongly. But overall, the impact of the film would regard Lazar as a so-called missing piece in the UFO story up to that point, allowing him to step out of the public light to pursue his own projects without any further apparent military presence. So was that the end of the Lazar story? Was he able to ride off into the sunset, having proven that the US government possessed alien technology and had made contact with extraterrestrials? Not entirely. Having retired from the world of UFO whistleblowing in secrets, Lazar set up his own company called United Nuclear Scientific Equipment and Supplies, which supplied rare and sought-after chemicals amongst other services. Apparently his true passion was chemistry rather than physics. In 2016, this business was raided by the FBI, which was believed by conspiracy theorists to be related to element 115, as Lazar had previously claimed to have stolen a sample from Area 51.
Holding nuclear weapons, not nuclear weapons, but like nuclear samples requires a hell of a lot of shit, so to be doing that without like some kind of insane college degree would be pretty ridiculous. So he must have some knowledge.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's doubting that when it comes to chemistry and his interest in that. But I think the physics is where things really seem to fall down, and many renowned and not so renowned, anyone with a basic, quite an advanced level of physics is able to just say that the Bob Lazar's claims are utterly baseless and just beyond the point where they can be disproven. I think it's just that ridiculous. But yeah, so this raid was actually part of an ongoing murder investigation into the mysterious death of a 31-year-old in 2015 who was thought to have been exposed to thallium poisoning. Thallium is an element commonly used in electronics and pharmaceuticals and is quite rare and sought after by collectors, and Lazar was known to have sold it through his company but was not suspected of murder. Since his original reference to the enigmatic element 115, a team of Russian scientists were able to synthesize the isotope in 2003, producing an element with an incredibly short half-life and that was highly radioactive, but there have been no successful attempts to create a stable version suitable to power spacecraft. Other inconsistencies to his story surround his apparent loss of identity, which has since been explained by the fact that Lazar was adopted as a child, so anyone searching for his birth certificate may have been looking in the wrong places, which is owing to how hospital records and general just birth certificates are handled in America, confidentiality rules. It's a lot of jumping through hoops and stuff, and Lazar has since actually come out and admitted he might have got that one wrong owing to his adoption. And he has admitted that he was adopted. Also, the circumstances with which Lazar came to be employed by Area 51 are certainly questionable, concerning a supposed nuclear explosion that killed his predecessor. Bob has stated that the blast was an accident that took place in a tunnel, where a 20-kiloton explosion killed 3 people in May 1987. But considering the official records from the test sites, there were 3 announced tests that took place in April that year for explosions that ranged from 20 to 150 kilotons. Lazar claimed that the test was unannounced, which does seem reasonable given that it appeared to be a complete accident. But again, no records indicate any unannounced tests in 1987, following a publishing of records from the test site in 1993. Even seismograph readings didn't register any significant activity from May 1987, with the only activity triggering sort of earthquake-like tremors in the Earth during that year stemmed from the 3 announced tests in April. Finally, it's worth noting that prior to his relocation to Las Vegas from Los Alamos, Lazar filed for bankruptcy in 1986, which may call into question the legitimacy of his hiring in a highly confidential, top-secret position in one of the most secretive organizations in the world. There are many more elements to Bob Lazar's stories I haven't covered, otherwise his theory would have taken up the entire podcast. Top secret UFO engineer or not, Lazar is clearly a fascinating individual with a checkered past, which has involved criminal convictions for prostitution, handling restricted chemicals, reports of his missing identity and school data, jet-powered cars and fireworks festivals. Well, the story appears to be a vivid insight into the life of top-secret UFO engineer, which is certainly compelling to many theorists and ufologists. Further scrutiny of the details highlights numerous flaws and inconsistencies. To summarize, I will leave you with a quote from the man himself, which states that the more incredible the lie, the more people will believe it. So which camp do you guys fall into? The hardcore UFO truthers, or was Bob just a guy looking to make a name for himself based on second-hand knowledge and a wild imagination?
Well, I mean, I really enjoyed that theory. He's someone who is, as you kind of touched on, incredibly well known in the conspiracy and in the UFO worlds. I had seen him on Joe Rogan, and I'd heard a few other things about him before this, but I didn't know most of the stuff. He said, I didn't know that he was almost completely untraceable in terms of his birth certificate and all that. And the adoption explanation seems a bit odd to me, because I don't think it really explains anything other than maybe not being able to find the birth certificate, but you'd still find all his degrees and he'd still be in yearbooks and you'd have records of where he'd worked and all of that. So I do think kind of fact that he's been wiped is very suspicious. And yeah, maybe it does add a bit of weight to it, and kind of NASA or whoever, military, are just trying to discredit him, and as good as remove all his degrees by just taking his name off them so that he looks even more like a nutter making it all up. So I think that works in the theory's favour, actually, that he was wiped and you can't really find any trace of him. Yeah, I think the lie detector is quite interesting. It's always difficult to know about the reliability of them. And I know modern day ones are meant to be about 98% accurate, and then we don't know whether it was particularly independent or not.
From the outside looking as well, you just hear a lie detector test that instantly adds a layer of credibility.
Yeah, at the very least, it bumps it up a bit. I think in terms of the overall theory, that obviously he'd worked, with the government and he'd seen all this technology and was aware of aliens and all that stuff. As a theory on the whole, it's a 9 out of 10 for me. Just the fact that he's then been allowed to go out and he's been spreading the word, and it's almost like something out of a film that he's the one crazy guy in the room and he's seen all this stuff and no one believes him. If it was all true, it'd be a horrible position to be in. You're doing your best to get the word out and warn people and let everyone know, and everyone's just kind of ridiculing you. In terms of believability, it's always going to be difficult with ones like this because you're never going to find any concrete proof. And you can never fully rule out the idea that it was just completely made up, although you feel like there's better ways to become famous and rich than alienate yourself, pardon the pun, from everybody. Believability-wise, I do think the fact he's still alive, and when you touched on earlier saying, if it was all true, he would have been assassinated. I do think that isn't necessarily the case. That it would be reasonable that they'd just let him carry on talking. So, I don't know. I did read somewhere about him, actually, that somebody did a statement analysis on him, and they reckoned that he wasn't telling the truth. But again, I suppose it's more difficult to tell because that was just from a transcript of what he was saying. But when you say about the memory problems, I think that probably played a big part in it. That he might be stumbling over his words quite legitimately. He could have just having trouble remembering it. But I think I'm going to go just below kind of average mark and believability. I'm going to go for a 4 out of 10.
That's fair enough. Yeah, slightly higher than Project Serpo, which
Oh yeah,
admittedly
definitely
is more outrageous, all things considered.
far more outrageous.
Like it's not beyond the realms of possibility. He could have seen a few UFO related things if he worked at this S4, just completely exaggerated them to tell his story and try and grab a bit of fame. But yeah, it's good stuff there. What about you, Luke?
I think all conspiracies relating to Area 51 are always going to be interesting, and this one is no different. I think the thing is with Area 51 is, I mean, we don't really know the sheer numbers, but I mean, a lot of people work there for sure, and all it takes is one of them many people to, speak up and say something, and there you go. You got your Bob Lazar. So yeah, you wouldn't really be surprised if there was a whistleblower, especially with kind of like all the dodgy stuff that was going on there, and maybe someone has a bit of morals, questioning their morals and things. This is something the world should really know about. And yeah, it's just one of them ones again that you want to be true, and it's really interesting because it's related to aliens, and I think everyone finds that interesting. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Good stuff again.
In terms of believability, as I kind of mentioned, all it takes is one whistleblower. At the same time, Area 51, I feel like, is always going to be something when you get someone come up and say something about it, whether that's true or not. It's kind of like, guaranteed that someone was going to claim they had an affair with David Beckham.
Yeah.
I just feel like you can guarantee someone was going to say that they worked at Area 51 because it's just such a well-renowned conspiracy. And then also the thing that brings the believability down for me as well is the whole university thing. Caltech and MIT, they're both pretty big colleges, and all it takes is for one person to remember Bob Lazar being there, and then it gives his theory credit. And not only are they very big universities, they're very famous. You have to be incredibly intelligent to work there, and most people who work there will end up on 6-figure salaries, and the government will have to pay them a hell of a lot not to, talk about this. The lie detector test, as John mentioned, definitely adds to believability in some ways, but at the same time, as we kind of mentioned, if he remembers it as true and he's just a nutter, then it will probably come up as true. So for sure, it's definitely a bit more believable than Project Serpo, but I'm definitely erring towards the side of caution. And I think I'm going to go for a 3 out of 10 on believability. I think it's got potential. It wouldn't surprise me if someone at some point had tried to do some whistleblowing on Area 51, but I just don't think it's Bob Lazar.
That's fairly sensible approach there. I mean, there's besides like you alluded to, like the whistleblowing angle. I think it's almost like too good to be true. Someone comes out about Area 51. It's not coming out as a very small institution that may have had something related to UFOs or military technology. It's got to be the big one that everyone knows to get the maximum exposure.
No smoke without fire, though, is there?
That's true, yeah. It's like I suggested that it might have been known as something and just completely ran with it and tried to, I don't know, exaggerate it to the nth degree to make it sound incredulous. Like I said, more incredible, more believable, as his argument goes. Which almost discredits this entire theory, unless it's a quote taken out of context, which it may well be. But yeah, one thing, say, just pushing the physics entirely aside, because none of us really are physicists, and we're not about to disprove or prove complex quantum physics and anti-gravitational propulsion systems and stuff like that. He could be making that element up just to try and, I don't know, add some scientific weight to it.
You feel like it could be disproved, though, by somebody out there. So if it hasn't, maybe it's got something to it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed. That nothing he said has been categorically disproven. But I suppose to disprove it, you'd have to get your hands on antimatter or something like that.
The element 115 thing was quite interesting because he was claiming it about it, and then you said the Russians managed to do a bit of research and discover it.
Yeah, there's also the angle he might have got confused between element 114, but it's like as you go up the elements or something like that, it gets progressively less stable and less likely, or more radioactive, and basically just less likely to be able to be used as part of a engine system, no matter how extraterrestrial the craft. But again, it's just hard science, which I'm no expert in. But overall, the conspiracy is really interesting. It's a complete rabbit hole you go through with this one. Spent a lot of time just digging through records and documentaries and things like that. You've got a fascinating story that's definitely not to be up for debate. And there's a lot more I didn't have time to get to regarding certain other inconsistencies in his story. Maybe not entirely relevant to the UFO angle, just his life in general. So again, another solid 9 out of 10 from me. But I suppose given that I've done a little more reading than you two, my belief is going to be slightly lower, just because there's the amount of information that just plain discredits him. He's just almost like an enthusiast who got caught out, I think, basically with alleging towards his spottings of UFOs in the Nevada desert, which weren't even UFOs in the end, it turns out. So I suppose as the story goes. But again, that's a whole other can of worms, that one, which to try and get into. I've read lots of reports that have basically completely discredited him. Still, there's something in there you think he might know something, like he could have spoken to someone. He clearly does know science with his chemistry business, and potentially might have had some physics, given that he was able to build a jet-powered car and has an interest in fireworks and explosives and things like that. He actually hosted a festival in the 80s and 90s called Desert Blast, where all sorts of crazy individuals would come with rocket-powered vehicles, rocket launchers, flamethrowers, etc., just celebrate blowing things up.
Does sound like a blast.
Exactly, yeah. A blast not in name only. But I think by believability, I'm going for a 2.5 out of 10. Not to say it's not an incredibly interesting theory. And you would like just one whistleblower to come out and be incredibly credible about this whole thing, because as far as we know, the government aren't going to be saying anything apart from incredibly controlled press releases, if that. But yeah, I think that's enough from me, and I'll throw things over to Luke for a final conspiracy of the podcast.
All right, thanks for that, Calum. So I'm going to go into my theory now. It's a bit of a short one, but it's the theory that the dinosaurs were wiped out by aliens. So just a very, very basic, brief background. The universe has obviously been around for billions and billions of years, and whilst life on Earth was at an early stage at the time of the dinosaurs, life forms elsewhere could have existed for years. If an intelligent life form were to visit Earth today, it is probable some form of communication could be had, and they are probably unlikely to want to kill us. Earth probably has little to offer them, unless of course they were to land in Roswell, New Mexico, in which case they'd be taken and locked up for life.
It's something when you get to meet their mates.
Yeah, nice holiday for them. However, can you imagine aliens visiting Earth in the dinosaur timeline and coming face to face with these ginormous, often carnivorous beasts that could reach up to 120 foot in height? There's arguably no room for communication and likely no room for peace, as the dinosaurs will more than likely attack them.
Maybe that's why they've never come back. Dinosaurs scared them off.
Wouldn't blame them either. Can you imagine in every single solar system there's just these stories of dinosaurs on Earth and everyone's like so scared of us. The one that did eventually come back got chucked into friggin' Area 51. He never came home to tell the story, so everyone just assumed.
Ancient myth of like the deadly Earth planet. We're not going to go there. Just to scare little baby aliens at night.
So, given this hostile environment for aliens visiting Earth, there is potential they may have wanted to exterminate life forms on Earth so they could properly explore or colonize the planet, much like the British Empire did when exploring a new place back in the day.
Ooh.
Too soon.
No, it's too soon.
So one thing I will say is, I'm not sure how you guys feel about this, but I don't think a weapon to wipe out the entire planet is too unimaginable, given humans themselves were able to create weapons that could annihilate an entire city like over 75 years ago. I feel like if enough money was chucked at it, like a country could probably create one of them kind of weapons.
Yeah, I agree.
You do remember the petition for Obama to build a Death Star that's got over 100,000 and probably way more signatures? And we all know that Star Wars was a documentary, so it's been done before.
Well, apparently they were considering it, not just the US, but like I don't know whether it was like NATO or something, were considering putting like a laser in space to like disintegrate any potential asteroids that we're going to hit and end Earth. But they decided it wasn't worth $1 trillion or whatever it would have cost, so they didn't go ahead with it.
I think I've heard about that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
You think someone who's got it and has had a bad day, find out his wife's been cheating on him or something like that. He's like, rather just take out the rest of the Earth. I don't care. I'm done.
Going out of a big bang.
You certainly go. Actually, no, wouldn't we go down in history because we know history left of the Earth being raised.
So yeah, given the vastness and age of the universe, I think it would be ignorant to assume, if there are other life forms out there, that we are the most intelligent life form. And hence you could argue there's technology out there in the galaxy that would blow our minds if we were ever able to see it. You can just kind of imagine showing someone from the 1500s the technology we have today. And that's just a 500-year span, which is so relatively small in terms of the universe. If you could time travel, what technology would you show someone from like 500 years ago?
I don't know how we get our hands on one, but you think if he showed them like a proper working automatic weapon, that would make conflict very interesting and one-sided.
You could take over the world.
Yeah.
You could be the Genghis Khan.
I didn't want to just give the boring answer of a smartphone or something like that.
I know, yeah.
Nah, that's too boring, yeah.
They wouldn't be able to comprehend it anyway. At least with a weapon, you think they'd be able to understand why this kills many people.
That was my logic as well. You like say, oh, look at this phone, you can get Google on it, and they're like, what the fuck's Google?
Why would I want
Can't
to
even
search
teach.
the World Wide Web? It wouldn't even work back in ancient times, would it? You wouldn't connect the internet.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. You take the smartphone back and then there's no internet, so you can just
Yeah.
show them like a snake or
Or
something.
candy
I
crush.
think maybe a lighter would be a good idea.
Yeah. You just completely spoiled it. I was going to say something like a microwave, but then you can't plug it in anywhere. So.
No.
Your light would be great if you go back to the caveman.
Yeah, exactly. I was genuinely, my suggestion was going to be lightsabers, then I realised they're not real.
Toy one.
Force FX, mate.
So some conspiracists believe aliens actually wiped out the hostile dinosaurs in order to allow other more advanced life forms to blossom on Earth, as it was always going to be a struggle for an intelligent life form to be given the chance on Earth when those huge guys were going to be around. And they claim the aliens did this by dropping a huge nuclear-like weapon on the Earth, more precisely landing in the Chicxulub crater in Mexico. This is actually the same crater that many point to as proof that the dinosaurs were wiped out by an asteroid. Of all people, and sadly this probably brings the believability of my theory down, the Flat Earth Society stated that the evidence for this alien nuke is irrefutable. There are supposed high levels of iridium in the soil layers in the crater, which proved that some kind of nuclear weapon was used. I mean, I love how they're not even putting it up for debate.
I know.
It doesn't seem. I'm not saying it doesn't add up with the asteroid argument, a huge asteroid. I'm not sure how does that wipe out an entire planet's worth of very large creatures, or just cause such a shock to the ecosystem. I can't really remember the specific arguments.
Yeah, so I was going to touch on it a bit now. So when people describe how the dinosaurs were wiped out by an asteroid, it's often stated that the impact caused like a huge black fog which covered the Earth, and oxygen was then sparse, plant life died, herbivore dinosaurs then died, and then the meat eaters died. So everyone just ran out of food and oxygen, really.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That really does ring a few bells now.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the one I've heard.
I think what I find the most interesting about that explanation is it does sound like suspiciously similar to what we'd kind of expect in like a nuclear winter situation.
I suppose a black fog, radioactive clouds, plants dying, mutations, can't find anything to eat, society turns on each other, mass extinction. Yeah, makes sense.
But there's only so many ways everything on Earth, or pretty much everything on Earth, could get wiped out anyway, isn't it? It's only really ever going to be a lack of food or massive like toxicity in the air. There's a very finite number of ways that you could wipe out everything on Earth.
It's only really the land creatures that died, quite a few sea creatures.
Yeah, that's true. There are some secrets trace their origins back to the dinosaurs, who minor evolutions in the grand scheme of things compared to our tracing ours back to the first fish decided to grow legs and step out of the ocean. Respect that absolute mad lad.
Things like crocodiles apparently haven't really evolved at all in the last 50 million years or whatever. So is the explanation for that they just fed on things in water?
Yeah, I'd assume so, yeah. Or they're just peak life forms, so didn't need to evolve.
Yeah.
Well, you look at a crocodile and you think it's pretty threatening. It's got big jaws, it's strong, it can swim, perfect environment.
Apart from the fact it's got absolutely no muscle to open its mouth, it's closed shut.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? You can put an elastic band around their mouth and they can't open it, but they slam shut with about 10 tons of force.
So some people even go as far as saying that it was actually humans who dropped the weapon and then later inhabited Earth, with some suggesting that this is actually why some of the great ancient civilizations are often linked to aliens. None more so than the ancient Egyptians, of course, who many suggest had alien help in building the pyramids, which we would touch on in a later episode, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that comes back to me whenever we talk about aliens and the pyramids, just a quote from Mark from Peep Show saying, "No, Jeremy, slaves built the pyramids. Lots and lots of slaves."
I know, yeah. That's a good quote.
Funny enough, I haven't really included this in my theory, but when I was researching my theory, I saw someone suggest it was actually the dinosaurs that built the pyramids, and it's the only explanation because they were the only ones strong enough to do
it. With what? Picking them up with their mouths?
I have no idea.
They have to make complex geometric shapes. How do you explain the Sphinx?
Intelligent life, that's why. So in a bit of a more far-fetched and deeper conspiracy linked to this, and it was also linked to an American Chemical Society finding. It sounds dangerously close to what Bob Lazar was involved in. People suggest that aliens destroyed the dinosaurs to allow a humanoid life form to inhabit Earth as part of a greater dinosaur versus humanoid universe war. Now you're gonna have to hear me out on this one.
That
I'm
sentence just kept
interested.
going.
So, the American Chemical Society, more precisely Ronald Breslow, suggested that life forms based on slightly different amino acids and sugars take the form of huge, ferocious dinosaurs that have evolved to have human-like intelligence and technologies. It's only on Earth that a freak-like incident such as an asteroid wiping out the dinosaurs and stopping their development, which allowed human life to form. If habitable worlds are more likely to form dinosaur than humanoid life form, then there could be intelligent life forms out there with incredible technologies, with intelligent, ginormous dinosaurs running the show. And in a bid to keep humanoid form alive in the universe, the more intelligent forms attacked early dinosaur settlements before their development into intelligent life forms, allowing humans to blossom on more planets, for example, Earth.
I say one thing, he's definitely given that considerable thought to make those links. He's got a very wild imagination.
This is something that I've mentioned before. I don't think I've mentioned it on the podcast, but like if the asteroid didn't hit Earth, would the dinosaurs be sat here recording this podcast and going to work and insurance and investment banking?
Deal
Like,
with the
what would they be doing?
economy.
Well, you joke, but I genuinely think that is the consensus that they would have advanced and have like phones and all that stuff.
You see a Brontosaurus driving down,
But you think
and
that
one in a Ferrari.
massive variety in dinosaur shapes, forms, and sizes is vastly different to the differences that exist between humans. So I don't know how you'd have to design workplaces suitable for both Brontosaurus and tiny little velociraptors, and stop the velociraptors using their predatory instincts of just snapping those necks.
I guess you'd have to argue like one would win out and be the human kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that would
because you could say like we're around
monkeys.
so many species, like there's crocodiles, there's dogs, etc.
I suppose, yeah, that did really take that into account at all. I was going with the ridiculous idea, just dinosaurs won out and became humans.
Well, there is Velociraptor theory. I don't know if you guys have heard it before.
I have not heard of that, but I'm very interested.
I've not heard it. If you want to give a brief summary.
All right, yeah. So basically, the Velociraptor was allegedly by far the most evolved and advanced dinosaur. And because obviously by this catastrophic event happening and wiping all the dinosaurs out, who were at that point the most evolved species, particularly the Velociraptor, it basically set back our evolution by, 500 million years or something, because it had to basically start from scratch on Earth. So the theory goes that if that event never happened and the asteroid never hit, that by the present day, Velociraptors would be kind of by far the most advanced species on Earth, and they would have mastered space travel by now, and they'd be able to go to any other planet and stuff, because they basically would be far more intelligent than us, and then they'd also have 500 million years more evolution to them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the thing. Like, you just have to imagine, like, where we don't get wiped out, where we'd be in 500 million years. Like, you'd like to think by then we'd have,
you can't comprehend it.
faster. Yeah.
Either that or the sun will have gone supernova and swallowed up the Earth.
Yeah.
I think that's still a few billion years.
I don't know what with global warming and all the other scaremongering out there.
I think going down this route, just asking for a low believability score, but it's definitely food for thought, as undoubtedly, as John kind of mentioned, intelligent dinosaur form could be possible in the form of velociraptors, and not only that, intelligent dinosaur form would be way more powerful than intelligent human form, just based on sheer size and kind of power alone. What is interesting with such a far-fetched conspiracy like this is that although it is so unbelievable, the official story that asteroids wiped out dinosaurs is guesswork, lacks evidence, and so there is scope for the official story to be completely wrong. Given we only found out dinosaurs were a thing less than 200 years ago, we know little about our own planet, let alone the universe. I can't imagine being alive in 1824 when kind of the first dinosaur was discovered and, just being told all of a sudden that huge carnivorous beasts used to roam the planet. It would just totally blow your mind. But yeah, that's all I've got for you on this theory. How are you guys feeling about it?
I just suppose bringing up dinosaurs up, as most children were, in primary school as well, I was absolutely fascinated by them. I remember wanting to become a paleontologist at one point, despite in hindsight realizing that most of all the big discoveries have now been made. Very difficult industry to get into. Discovering these huge bones, piecing them together to realize these magnificent beasts and managing to date them back to millions of years before our existence. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I think as well, what's interesting is I don't know if it's the same across the world, but dinosaurs is pretty much one of the first things you learn about in school in the UK.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I know you
It's
learn
just
about
no
it
use to, yeah.
or I guess it's just normalized because it's such a weird concept.
Yeah.
But yeah, as Calum mentioned, it's just such an interesting topic, and it's just something that you wish you knew more about. Like you wish you knew what velociraptors would be like today if they were given the chance to evolve into intelligent life form, like what they'd be doing, whether they'd be cruising around the galaxy and stuff like that. It's just really, really food for thought and super interesting.
Yeah, there's so many different angles you can take with the series. You really want to go crazy with wild ideas.
Yeah, and given that two predominant life forms on Earth kind of evolved in such different ways, it really does beg the question, like, what could alien life form look like?
For all we know, we could be descendants of Ebens who wiped out the rest of the dinosaurs and just implanted their own race, and over time they grew a bit taller, their heads shrunk, developed opposable thumbs.
I mean, it started off as cavemen.
Cavemen and also monkeys as well, potentially. Throw that in there. So just for the reason just how crazy you can get with this theory, I'm going to give it a solid 8.5. I really enjoyed hearing about it. And it just basically reinvigorated my interest in dinosaurs. Actually, it would absolutely destroy my world if it was revealed it was all a hoax. Imagine that. So all these records of fossils and discoveries have all just been a crazy conspiracy to keep like children. I don't know.
Isn't that what creationists essentially believe?
Yeah, they believe God planted the fossil. As a
to test you.
Yeah, test your belief.
I just can't believe, imagine being that dogmatic about something. It's a topic for another time.
I mean, I guess they are the true conspiracies.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's rational ways I believe that maybe God was the one who created the Big Bang. He was the one who decided to click his fingers and make it all happen and just believe in evolution alongside their faith. But to completely deny evolution, it's just bonkers. So we're getting on to believability. I think I'm going to say Project Serpo is less believable than this. Just because, as you mentioned, you think you never know millions and millions of years how old the galaxy has been. And the argument, it might be correlation rather than causation, but a nuclear winter is quite similar to the effects of a massive asteroid blocking out the sun and destroying the ecosystem and the natural food chain and causing mass extinction. It's not entirely impossible. It could have been a weapon. Maybe not to implant a whole new race of aliens, which then were to evolve into us millions of years down the line. But you never know. So my believability, I'm going to go for a 2 out of 10.
I think you're going to echo Calum's thoughts in a lot of ways. It's a great theory, that everything we're told about the dinosaurs is wrong. And when you've got such strong scientific evidence backing it up from the flat Earth community, then it also obviously adds a lot of weight to it. But yeah, the dinosaurs were in essence nuked. I think it's got to be an 8.5 out of 10. I like the fact that it wasn't specific enough to say the motives behind it, whether the dinosaurs had frightened them off and it was like a self-defense thing from the aliens, or whether it's so that they could colonize Earth with something a bit more humanoid. I think believability on this one, I'm going to go for a 10. I think as much as this might hurt you to hear, Luke, I think I may have to go for a 1 out of 10, I'm afraid. The dinosaurs were nuked.
I mean, I can't believe you're putting it on the same par as Prince Philip reincarnated coronavirus. I can't believe it's that unbelievable. But I think it's probably two of the things that I'm most fascinated with, dinosaurs and aliens, and just being able to link them together in this way. It's nice, even though it's ridiculous. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 as a conspiracy. It's clearly ridiculous, but at the same time, you do have to think that there's arguably life forms out there that have been around for billions of years longer than humans, and who knows what they could have invented and come up with in those billions of years. And I mean, if they came to Earth and these dinosaurs are kind of like snapping at them, they might be like, they're not intelligent, colonize the planet or kill the kind of hostile hosts on Earth so intelligent life can form. I mean, it's far-fetched, but
you never know.
I give it a high score just because I want to, but I can't. It's a 1.5 out of 10, that one. That wraps up the 3 conspiracies, and I believe, Calum, you've got a lovely game of conspiracy for us today.
I do indeed. So it's time to round up the podcast, as we always do, with our not quite trademarks or copyrighted, but we're close, game of conspiracy. If you're new to the podcast and haven't listened before, this involves the host, me, selecting 3 conspiracy theories, 2 of which are genuine and somewhere out there on the internet truly believes them, was always posting them for a joke. And the third one is made up by myself, and it's my co-host's job to identify the conspiracy from the 3. Without further ado, let's get into the conspiracies. Number 1, Barack Obama is actually a shape-shifting alien from the same race that has infiltrated the royal family and global elite.
Seems like a pretty standard one, that one. Everyone's linked to being some kind of reptile alien.
Pretty normal, as these conspiracies go, but hold your horses on that one, I'll say that much. So, number 2, Blink-182 frontman Tom DeLonge quit Blink-182 to become a full-time UFO hunter. And number 3, the push for more disclosure regarding UFO incidents, especially from the Pentagon and US government, is actually a domestic ploy designed to increase US military funding.
Difficult they are. So do you want to give us a little bit more info on the 3 of them? Make our decision a bit easier.
I'll see what I can do. Yes, which one do you want to hear about first?
Barack Obama, please.
Right, so I'm sure that you're aware there's been many calls for Obama's birth certificate, and his heritage has been called into question by many of his political rivals over the years, including Donald Trump. The general consensus is that he's either from Kenya or from Indonesia, and he's not actually a full US citizen as required by the second article of the Constitution to be US president. But it turns out that these theories are actually true, but at the same time, they're a lot further away from the truth than they would have ever have imagined. Obama is actually from the Alpha Draconis star system, along with the royal family, the Bush family, and the Rothschilds, to name a few. And you might recall, as I think was John mentioned, Obama said that there's not very much to Area 51. And that's actually as part of the global plot by the Alpha Draconians to keep people out of the know of the UFOs and aliens that are visiting and dropping off more of their race to infiltrate the global elite.
Okay, I mean, pretty convincing stuff.
Got many conspiracists convinced, myself included.
Yeah. So what was the second one?
The second was the Blink-182 frontman, so singer of All the Small Things and other great pop punk classics.
Oh, yeah. This one, though, the thing about that one, is there even a conspiracy there? It's either true or it's a lie.
Not quite. So there's a little extra information that might tip the balance, shall I say.
Go on, then.
So drummer Travis Barker said in interviews that Tom had always been an avid UFO conspiracist who would look for UFOs while out on tour, and even went so far as to organise search parties to hunt for Bigfoot. And also remember during the introduction when I was mentioning the UFO footage that was officially declassified by the Pentagon earlier this year, there was Tom DeLonge's alien searching company that actually leaked the footage originally in 2017. So that's a bit of background on that
like
one.
A hero.
Yeah, so he set up his originally entertainment company, branched out into science and aerospace amongst other divisions, with the aim to disrupt the status quo and reach transformative discoveries within our reach that will revolutionize the human experience. That's his mission statement.
Okay, and then the final one.
So the final one is the recent push for more disclosure, RE, government releasing UFO footage and trying to appear more transparent. It's actually a ploy to increase military funding, specifically for that of the Space Force that the US has just set up, as the Pentagon and other top military officials believe that space will be the next frontier for warfare. And they want to keep ahead of superpowers like China and Russia in the newest iteration of the space race.
What does the US Space Force actually consist of?
I think it's an idea in a Netflix TV series featuring Steve Carell. That's as far as I'm aware of it.
It's a comedy.
Truth can be stranger than fiction sometimes. For all we know, it could be a documentary. Steve Carell's actually a top government military official.
You never know. From what we know, they like to kind of shove it in your face, so it just seems so unbelievable. Because if they really were doing it, they wouldn't shove it in your face.
Double bluff sort of thing, you know.
Yeah, take some cheek, but fair play.
A little bit more on the third one. So theorists have highlighted the convenient timing surrounding Trump's creation of the Space Force and the sudden increase in activity by the Department of Defense, which began releasing numerous UFO-related documents and declassifying certain files. And this is also a similar occurrence to what went on during the original Cold War with Russia, where UFO sightings were at their peak.
So what's the logic behind it? They want everyone's attention on aliens so that they don't mind their taxes going towards them.
The military, yeah, because people are obviously not very big fans of war, especially the most vocal area of political sphere, very much anti-war. They still want to increase the military spending to take warfare to space, as they believe that's where the next generation of wars will be fought amongst the stars. And they want to basically keep their military spending by thinking, UFOs are out there, we need to keep channeling money research into the military to protect the nation just in case.
Okay. Luke, do you want to guess first?
Yeah, I think I have made my mind up. It's a tough one this week for sure. I think the thing regarding Barack Obama is, especially with the controversy over his kind of birth certificate and stuff like that, and, every powerful person in some way seems to have this reptilian alien link, so that one wouldn't surprise me at all if it was out there. The second one just seems too precise and too random for you to make up. I've never had you down as a Blink-182 fan, Calum.
The only song I probably could name is All the Small Things. I actually want What's My Age Again. That's another one, but those are the two biggest hits.
But then again, at the same time, I do remember you making up really good music conspiracy in another episode. Can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it being very interesting. So potentially you could have made that one up. But I'm edging towards the third one. It's kind of relevant and in the news, and I see it as something that you potentially may have picked up on and tried to get a conspiracy in there. So I'm going to guess the third one.
Right, and you, John, has this changed your mind? Has it solidified your opinion?
His logic was very similar to mine in the sense that I'm ruling out the middle one because it is too specific, and I think it's a bit of a punt from you because it'd be a bit of a risk to take on the off chance one of me or Luke were a big fan of Blink-182 and would know that to be true or not true. Fortunately for you, neither of us are, so it hasn't really aided me.
I did hedge my bets if I was to have made that one up.
So I'm ruling that one out. I was quite confident the Barack Obama one was a made-up one, but then, as Luke said, the third one's all very convenient. I'm just going to, for the sake of making it more entertaining, I'll go for the Barack Obama one is made up. Even though if I was only playing on my own, I think I might go for the last one.
Well then, it's not the first for conspiracy by any stretch of the imagination, because it is another win for conspiracy. I have indeed fooled one of you. But it could be a first this time in the fact that John has actually decided to differ from Luke and won. He has correctly identified the false conspiracy, which is that Barack Obama being an alien reptile from the Alpha Draconis system. Because as far as I was aware, I did a bit of research on this, I couldn't find anything to suggest that Barack Obama had been implicated as part of the Rothschilds, the Bush family, and the Clintons, etc., as part of this global elite who are actually aliens from outer space.
Well, the one thing one of these kind of smoking guns on that made me go towards it is the fact that he brought the Rothschilds into it when we'd spoken about them off air, like yesterday or the day before. I thought, oh, maybe that's in his head because of that conversation. That is part of the reason why I went for that.
Very, very good part of deduction there. I could have been something subconscious that clicked into my mind.
Yeah.
Aware of it. But yeah, try
that next week.
It's a risky move for sure. I mean, the Tom DeLonge one was, I won't admit it was a punt by me. I was basically banking on the fact you hadn't heard of Blink-182 because it was quite a specific theory with lots of specifics. So in hindsight, I probably should have made it a bit more vague.
Yeah.
But it's still quite interesting that his company was able to leak top secret Pentagon footage, essentially. Don't know how he got his hands on it, but fair play to him. It almost seems like he's forced the Pentagon's hand a couple of years down the line to actually say, right, these are what we'd class as UFO sightings.
Yeah, fair play to him.
Yeah, and the third one it's quite a big article on it. I don't know if it's just what you could have said I was doing, just trying to throw some stuff at the wall, see what sticks with regards to current news. It was a very recent publication based off the very recent reports from the Pentagon again. So, yeah, it's another one we could watch this space, if you'll pardon the pun, to see if Russia and China start taking us to war in the stars. We really will have a star war, the idea of which baffles me. I mean, it could be all right for human safety if you conduct a war in space, a lot less casualties, but I'm not sure what you're gaining from taking over vast areas of nothingness if you're thinking along the lines of traditional war.
Yeah, it'd be so easy to win that war because the US just sends all their best military and all their equipment and weapons into space, and then while they're up there, you just absolutely shell the shit out of mainland US.
It's like the greatest double bluff in wartime history. Guys were convinced whoever's in charge of the US when this goes down to move all of their troops up into space, spend trillions of dollars, and they just got to a simple task of either dropping a nuke on America or just shelling the shit out of them. So I think on that bombshell, I will wrap this podcast up. They're another really good edition of quite a topical issue at the moment, actually, regarding a lot more alien information that's being released and the seeming push by powers that be to further progress the UFO narrative and maybe alert the public to some extraterrestrial goings on, or maybe it could be a massive cover-up and disinformation to keep people stupid and distract them from some of the less, savoury goings on in the media, of which there are many. But yeah, we shall end things there, and I'll say goodbye from me and goodbye from my co-hosts John.
Goodbye.
And Luke.
Goodbye.
And don't forget, keep challenging the status quo.